Hey guys, tonight we're holding our breath, literally, and diving into the smelliest, most essential, and surprisingly lucrative business in the ancient world. We're going to find out exactly how the Romans kept those pearly white togas so white, and the answer isn't a magical detergent bar. It's a chemical process that involves human waste giant tubs and a lot of jumping. If you think doing your laundry is a chore, just wait until you see what these guys had to do. You might want to thank your washing machine after this. Before we step into the ammonia-filled air of the Roman laundry, I want to remind you that tonight's journey is a slow, immersive drift into the past. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, I'm curious, where are you listening from tonight and what time is it? Are you winding down in Berlin or waking up in Chicago? Let me know in the comments. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are walking down the basalt pavement of the Via dell'Abbondanza in Pompeii. It is high noon, and the sun is beating down on volcanic stones, baking the city in a dry, dusty heat. The air is thick with the usual smells of a Roman metropolis. The wood smoke from the bakery ovens, the faint metallic tang of the blacksmith's hammer, the garlicky aroma of sausages frying at the thermopolium on the corner. But as you turn the corner, all those familiar scents are suddenly obliterated. You are hit by a wall of smells so powerful, so sharp, and so distinct that your eyes immediately start to water. It stings your nostrils, a piercing chemical punch that smells like a stable that hasn't been cleaned in a month, mixed with a biting scent of modern window cleaner. You stop in your tracks, instinctively covering your nose with a fold of your tunic. This is the smell of money. This is the smell of civilization. You have arrived at the Falonica, the Fullery. To you, it smells like a public restroom on a hot day. To a Roman, it smells like the promise of a clean, white toga. You step closer to a wide, open storefront, unlike other shops that might be shuttered against the heat. The Falonica is wide open to let the fumes escape. The air inside is hazy, not with smoke, but with a vapor of evaporating chemicals. You are standing on the threshold of the most important industrial facility in the city. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that sets the stage for everything we are about to see: the Roman obsession with whiteness. In Rome, the color of your clothes wasn't just a fashion choice. It was a resume. A gleaming white toga, known as the toga candida, was a uniform of the politician, the citizen, and the upper class. But wool, by its nature, is creamy or yellowish. To get dazzling white, and to keep it that way in a city full of mud, smoke, and wine, required more than just water. It required the full ones. These were the laundry workers, the cloth processors, the chemical engineers of the ancient world. They didn't just wash clothes. They finished new cloth from the loom and restored old cloth that had been stained. They were the dry cleaners, the textile factory, and the tailors, all rolled into one stink-filled building. You step inside the shop. The floor is covered in waterproof cement, slick and wet. To your right, there are stacks of dirty laundry piled high, togas, tunics, cloaks, waiting for attention. To your left, there's a small shrine painted on the wall. You squint through the stinging air to make out the image. It depicts an owl, the ulula. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night: the owl of the Fullers. You might associate owls with wisdom, but in Rome, the owl was the mascot of the laundry trade. Why? Because the patron goddess of the craft was Minerva, the goddess of wisdom and weaving, and her sacred animal was the owl. But there's a funnier theory that some linguists whisper about. The Latin word for owl, ulula, sounds suspiciously like the verb ululare, which means to howl or to wail. Some suggest it was an inside joke about the wailing songs the workers would sing while stomping on clothes, or perhaps the wailing of the customers when they smelled the cleaning fluid. The layout of the Falonica is surprisingly open. You might expect such a smelly operation to be banished to the outskirts of the city, hidden away behind high walls. But you are standing right in the middle of a prime residential district. The house next door is a luxurious villa with a garden. The shop across the street sells expensive jewelry. This brings us to a point of academic friction that keeps urban archaeologists debating in their excavation trenches: the zoning debate. For a long time, historians assumed that Roman cities must have been zoned like modern ones, with dirty industries separated from clean living areas. They looked at the smell of the Falanica and assumed it must have been a low class, despised trade that was pushed to the margins. However, a significant group of modern scholars, led by Miko Floor, argues that this is projection of modern sensibilities. They point out that in Pompeii alone, there are over 30 fooleries, and almost all of them are located on main streets, often sandwiched directly between the homes of the elite. Floor argues that the Romans simply didn't share our modern sensitivity to industrial smells, or rather, that the convenience of having your laundry done next door outweighed the nuisance of the ammonia. The debate is, were Romans nose blind to their own cities, or was a Falanica such a powerhouse of profit that it could literally buy the right to stink up the neighborhood? You walk deeper into the shop, your eyes finally adjusting to the gloom. The quiet struggle here isn't about silence. It's about endurance. You watch a man walk past you carrying a heavy amphora. He isn't carrying wine. He is carrying the secret ingredient that powers this entire operation. You catch a whiff of it as he passes, and your stomach turns slightly. It is urine, stale urine. In a world without soap, which the Romans knew about from the Gauls, but used mostly as hair pomade, not detergent, urine was the cleaning agent of choice. It was the bleach, the degreaser, and the fabric softener of the empire. You look around the front room. It looks like a normal atrium of a house, but it has been modified. The impluvium, the pool in the center normally used to catch rainwater, has been converted into a washing tank. The walls, which might have once held beautiful frescoes of landscapes, are now stained with the splashback of industry. You realize that this building used to be a home. Someone lived here. Someone raised children here. And then at some point, they decided that the laundry business was so profitable that they tore out the bedrooms, waterproofed the floors, and turned their living room into a chemical processing plant. The sensory overload is intense. It's not just the smell, it's the humidity. The air is heavy with moisture. You can feel the dampness clinging to your own clothes. You feel a strange sense of cognitive dissonance. You are standing in a place that produces a symbol of Roman purity, the white toga. Yet the place itself feels incredibly impure. It is a paradox. To create cleanliness, you must first wade through filth. To look like a god, you must employ men who smell like beasts. You lean against a pillar, trying to find a pocket of air that burns your lungs a little less. The quiet struggle of the fuller is beginning to dawn on you. It is a struggle of being essential but invisible. Every senator you see giving a speech in the forum, every bride walking down the aisle, every general celebrating triumph, they all depend on this room. They all depend on the smell that is currently making you lightheaded. Without the Falanica, Rome is just a collection of people in dirty, beige rags. The grandeur of the empire is built on a foundation of urine and hard labor. You watch the workers moving in the back. They are stripped down to their tunics, or sometimes just loincloths. Their legs are stained. Their hands are rough. They look at you, the clean visitor, with a mix of curiosity and indifference. They know something you don't. They know the dirty secrets of the elite. They know whose toga has wine stains, whose tunic is blood, and whose cloak smells of cheap perfume. They are the keepers of the city's hygiene, the alchemists of ammonia. You take a deep breath, regretting it immediately, and prepare to step further into the factory to follow a dirty toga on its journey from disgrace to glory. The smell is bad, yes, but as the Emperor Vespasian will later famously say, the money you make from it smells like nothing at all. You are standing in the dim, humid receiving room of the Falanica, your nose still twitching from the ammonia assault. The air is thick and damp, but now you have a more immediate problem to deal with. The foreman of the shop points to a pile of fabric crumpled on a low wooden table. It looks like a mountain of dirty snow. He barks an order, and you step forward to pick it up. You reach out, expecting to grab a bundle of laundry that weighs about as much as a modern basket of clothes. Instead, as you heave it into your arms, your knees buckle slightly. You aren't lifting a shirt, you are lifting a beast. This is the quiet struggle of the Roman laundry worker, the sheer, crushing weight of the garment itself. You are holding a toga virilis, the standard dress of a Roman male citizen. In movies, these look like light, airy bed sheets that float in the breeze. In reality, You are holding a massive, dense woven wool blanket that, when dry, weighs between 15 and 30 pounds. And this one isn't dry. It is damp with sweat, humidity, and the accumulated grime of the city. It feels greasy to the touch, heavy with the natural lanolin of the sheep and the unnatural oils of the owner. You realize that doing laundry in Rome isn't just a chemical process. It is a weightlifting workout. You drag the fabric over to a larger inspection table to unfold it. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that is essential to understanding the scale of your job: the sheer size of a toga. A standard toga was not a rectangle. It was a semicircle, or perhaps an ellipse cut in half. Along the straight edge, it measured about 15 to 18 feet long. At its widest point, it was about 6 to 9 feet deep. You unroll it, and it keeps going, and going. It spills off the table and onto the floor. You feel like you are unrolling a carpet. You realize that washing the single garment is going to take up more space than your entire modern bathroom. As you smooth out the heavy wool, you notice the texture. It isn't soft like modern merino. It is thick, sturdy, and slightly scratchy. This is a garment designed to last a lifetime, which is good, because it costs a fortune. This leads us to a point of academic friction that keeps economic historians debating in their ledgers: the cost of citizenship debate. We know from the Edict on Maximum Prices, issued much later by Diocletian, but reflective of earlier trends, that a high-quality toga could cost upwards of 1,000 denarii. To put that in perspective, a common laborer might earn 25 denarii a day. That means a single toga represents 40 days of hard labor. Some historians argue that this immense cost meant that the average Roman citizen actually owned only one good toga, which they wore until it fell apart. Others argue that there was a thriving second-hand market, or that cheaper, thinner versions existed for poor. The debate is, was a toga a universal garment of people, or was an elite status symbol that the poor only rented for special occasions? As you run your hand over this particular piece of fabric, feeling the high thread count, you suspect this one belongs to someone who has never missed a meal in his life. You look closely at the hem. It is frayed and caked with dried mud. This is the reality of the toga candida. To keep it white in a city with unpaved streets, open sewers, and coal smoke was a constant battle. The owner of this toga probably walked through Subura this morning, dodging ox carts and stepping in puddles of questionable liquid. Now, it is your job to make it look like it never left the pristine marble floors of the Senate. But there is a danger here. You see a strip of color running along the edge of the fabric. It is a deep reddish-purple band. This identifies the garment as a toga praetexta worn by magistrates and high-ranking officials. That stripe is terrifying to you. This brings us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night: the Tyrian panic. The purple dye used for that stripe comes from the murex sea snail, and it is worth more than its weight in gold. Literally. But here's the problem. Early dyeing techniques weren't always color fast. If you wash this toga in a mixture that is too harsh, or at a temperature that is too high, that precious purple stripe will bleed into the white wool. If that happens, you haven't just ruined a shirt, you have destroyed a symbol of state authority. You could be sued for the full value of the garment, which would effectively enslave you to the owner for the rest of your life. You look at the purple stripe with a mix of awe and dread. It is a landmine sewn into the fabric. You continue your inspection, hunting for tears or loose threads. You are like a forensic scientist of fabric. You find a small snag near the shoulder. Was this from a fibula, a brooch, or did the senator get caught on a nail in the forum? You have to mark it. If you make the hole bigger during the stomping process, it's on you. You grab a small piece of charcoal and make a mark on a wax tablet, noting the damage. Item 4, toga praetexta. Property of Lucius. Snag on left shoulder. Mud on hem. Smells like roast pork. The smell of the garment itself is a complex bouquet. Underneath the surface grime, the wool holds the scent of its owner. You smell olive oil, which Romans use instead of soap for bathing. You smell perfume, maybe saffron or cinnamon, used to mask the city stench. And you smell the distinct, musky odor of the wool itself. It's an intimate, invasive experience. You are handling the second skin of a powerful man. He might be a terrifying orator in the Senate, but here on your table, he is just a man who sweats, spills food, and walks in mud. The Phalonicus strips away the aura of power and leaves only the dirty laundry. As you heave the toga back into a pile, preparing it for the next stage, you notice the weave. It is tight and dense. This leads to another fascinating detail. The toga rasa versus toga pexa. A toga pexa was a garment with a long, fluffy nap, the fuzzy surface of the wool. It was warm and luxurious, favored in winter. Toga rasa had the nap shaved down smooth, making it lighter and cooler for summer. This one feels fuzzy. It's a pexa. That means it holds dirt deeper. You're going to have to work harder to get the grime out of those fibers. The fluffiness is a trap for dust. The physical labor of just moving these clothes is exhausting. You grab a tunic next, a much simpler T-shaped garment, and throw it on the pile. Then a cloak, asterisk pallium asterisk. Then another toga. The pile grows higher. You realize that you aren't just cleaning clothes. You are resetting the social order. Every morning, Rome wakes up dirty. Every evening, the fullers work to make it clean again. It is a cycle of entropy and restoration. Without you, the senators would look like beggars within a week. You wipe your hands on your own rough tunic. The grease from the wool has coated your fingers. You feel a strange sense of responsibility. This heavy, smelly, expensive mountain of wool is your charge. You have to take this chaotic mess of organic material and subject it to chemistry and violence until it becomes the pristine white uniform of the masters of the world. You look at the foreman. He nods. The inspection is done. The clothes have been logged. The damages have been noted. Now, the real dirty work begins. You have to figure out exactly what stains you are dealing with. Because in the Roman laundry, you don't treat a wine stain the same way you treat a blood stain, and making a mistake could cost you your freedom. You take a deep breath of the ammonia-laced air, steeling yourself. It's time to play detective. You are bent over the inspection table, your face just inches away from the rough, grimy surface of the toga pexa. The air around you is still thick with the stinging scent of ammonia, but down here in the microcosm of the fibers, the smells are different. They are organic, specific, and tell a chaotic story of the previous night. You are no longer just a heavy lifter. You have become the Sherlock Holmes of the suds. You are a forensic scientist of filth, and your job is to reconstruct the crime scene of a Roman dinner party using nothing but spills and splatters. You smooth out a particularly stiff section of the wool near the chest area. It is stained a deep brownish purple. You lean in and sniff. It's unmistakable. Wine. But not just any wine. This smells sharp, acidic, and heavy. It's likely Falernian, the high-alcohol, amber-colored vintage that hits the stomach like a gladiator's fist. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that dictates the geography of your laundry. The triclinium. Romans didn't eat sitting upright at a table like we do. They ate reclining on couches, leaning on their left elbows and using their right hands to eat. This posture was a disaster for laundry. It meant that every time a senator took a sip of wine or a bite of pork, the food had to travel over the vast, white expanse of his toga to reach his mouth. Gravity was the enemy. Most of the stains you find are concentrated on the sinus, the lap fold, and the umbo, the waist knot, the exact areas where gravity deposits the mistakes of the evening. You run your finger over the stain. It's crusty. Wine almost acts like a dye. If this was a cheap vintage, watered down with seawater, as was common, the salt might have set the stain even harder. You mark the spot with a small piece of colored thread. This area will need extra attention. You can't just stomp this out. It might need a specific poultice with ash or perhaps a rub with sulfur before it hits the main tank. You are triaging the garment, deciding which parts need surgery and which parts just need a bath. Moving down the fabric, your fingers encounter something invisible but terrifying, a slick, greasy patch. It doesn't look like much, maybe a slightly darker shadow on the white wool, but to Fuller, this is the enemy. It is olive oil. In Rome, olive oil wasn't just food, it was everything. It was the fuel in the lamps that dripped from the ceiling. It was the soap men slathered on their bodies at the baths. It was the base of every sauce. Oil doesn't dry like wine. It soaks into the hollow core of the wool fiber and hides there, waiting to turn rancid and yellow the fabric weeks later. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night. The ghost stain. Roman fullers knew that oil was hydrophobic. It hated water. You could wash this toga for a week in the river, and the oil would still be there. To fight it, you needed an alkali. You needed something that could chemically attack the fat and turn it into soap. And the best source of alkali available in the ancient world? You guessed it, fermented urine. The ammonia in the urine would react with the olive oil in the toga to create a crude form of soap inside the fabric itself. You realize that the cleaning process is essentially weaponizing the stain against itself. But first, you have to find it. You rub the fabric between your thumb and forefinger, feeling for the slip. Every greasy patch gets a thread. As you navigate the map of the toga, you find a patch of something truly unidentifiable. It smells sour, acidic, and complex. Was it a sauce? Was it something else? This brings us to a point of academic friction that keeps cultural historians arguing in their dining halls. The vomitorium debate. For a long time, there was a popular myth that Romans were such gluttons that they had special rooms called vomitoriums where they would go to throw up during a meal just so they could empty their stomachs and go back to eat more. You might have heard this story. It fits perfectly with our image of decadent, moral decay Rome. However, modern archaeologists and linguists have largely debunked this. The word vomitorium actually refers to the architectural passageways in a theater or amphitheater that allowed crowds to spew forth into the seats. It was an exit, not a bucket. But here's the friction. While the room didn't exist, the act certainly did. Seneca and other moralists complained bitterly about men who vomit to eat and eat to vomit. It wasn't a designated room. It happened right there at the table, into a bowl, or sometimes disastrously onto the toga. Some historians argue that these accounts are exaggerated satire, meant to shame the rich, while others argue that bulimia was a genuine status symbol of the ultra-wealthy. As you stare at the sour, crusty stain on the hem, you don't really care about the architectural terminology. You just know that someone had a very bad night, and now it is your problem. The stain is dangerous. Stomach acid eats wool. If you scrub too hard, you might put a hole right through the fabric. You mark it with red thread. Handle with extreme caution. You continue your investigation. You find a smear of something dark and metallic near the hem. Blood? It's possible. Maybe the senator cut himself shaving. Roman razors were notoriously dull. Maybe he got too close to a gladiator match. Or maybe more likely, he walked through the meat market on the way home. You sniff it. It smells of iron. Blood is a protein stain. If you wash it in hot water, it will cook into the fabric and never come out. You have to wash this part in cold water first. You are constantly making these chemical calculations in your head. Hot for grease, cold for blood, acid for wine. You are a walking periodic table of laundry. Then there is a smell that underpins it all, a faint, fishy funk that seems to emanate from the very soul of the garment. Garum, the fermented fish sauce that Romans put on everything, from pear soufflés to roasted ostrich. It is a ketchup of the ancient world, but infinitely more pungent. A drop of garum on a toga is a social death sentence if not removed. It smells like low tide. You find the spot, a small, innocent-looking brown speck. You scratch it with your fingernail, and the smell blooms, potent and salty. This will require the heavy artillery. This is go to the bottom of the urine vat. You step back, wiping your forehead with the back of your hand. The toga is now covered in small colored threads, looking like a crime scene map. You have identified the enemies. The Falernian wine, the bath oil, the stomach acid, the mystery blood, and the pervasive garum. You have profiled the owner. He is a messy eater. He uses too much oil. He likes expensive wine. And he probably needs to watch his cholesterol. But identifying the stains is only the first step. Now, you need the ammunition to fight them. You can't just use water. Water is weak. You need something with chemical teeth. You need something that burns. You look toward the door of the Falonica, out toward the street corner. You know what you have to do. You have to go shopping for detergent. But you aren't going to a store. You are going to a clay pot sitting on the sidewalk, where the citizens of Rome have graciously left a donation for you. The quiet struggle of the inspection is over. The mental work is done. Now comes the physical, nauseating reality of collection. You grab a bucket. You take a deep breath of the relatively fresh air inside the shop, knowing it is the last clean breath you will take for a while. You are about to engage in the most infamous aspect of the fuller's trade, the part that makes polite Romans wrinkle their noses even as they hand you their clothes. You are going to fetch the pee. You step out of the gloomy, humid interior of the Falonica and back into the blinding glare of the Pompeian noon. The transition is jarring. Your eyes squint against the sun, and for a moment, the fresh air feels like a blessing until you remember why you are out here. You are not strolling to the forum to hear a speech. You are not heading to the baths to scrub off the grime of the morning. You are on a supply run, but unlike a baker fetching flour or a blacksmith fetching coal, your raw material is something that most civilizations spend a lot of energy trying to get away from. You are carrying 2 empty amphorae, swinging from a yoke across your shoulders, and you are hunting for the liquid gold of the Roman laundry trade, human urine. You walk down the sidewalk, dodging the crowds. The quiet struggle here is the struggle of social dignity. You are a fuller, or at least you are working for one today, and everyone knows what that means. You are the piss collector. People give you a wide berth. A group of elegant matrons in colorful stolas wrinkles their noses as you pass. A pair of soldiers cracking jokes falls silent and steps aside. You are necessary, like a garbage man or a grave digger, but nobody wants to stand downwind of you. You keep your head down, focusing on the rhythmic clink-clink of the clay jars against your hip. You reach the corner of the Via dell'Abbondanza and a smaller side street. There, sitting against the wall of a tavern, is your target. It is a dolium. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that illustrates the magnificent pragmatism of the Romans, the public urinal system. The Romans didn't have a flush toilet in every home. Wealthy houses had latrines, often connected to the kitchen, which is a whole other hygiene horror story. But for the average man walking the street, when nature called, he had 2 options: wet the wall, which was illegal and frowned upon, or use the pot. The fullers, enterprising capitalists that they were, placed large, wide-mouthed clay jars on street corners explicitly for this purpose. It was a symbiotic relationship. The pedestrian got a free, legal place to relieve himself, and the fuller got a free supply of ammonia. You approach the jar. It is a dolium curtum, a jar that has had its top neck sliced off to create a wider opening, making it easier to aim. It's nearly full. The surface of the yellow liquid is buzzing with flies, a dark, shifting cloud that rises angrily as you approach. The smell in the direct sunlight is fermenting, sharp and hot. It hits the back of your throat like a physical blow. You set your carrying jars down on the pavement. This is the moment of truth. You have to transfer the contents of the public pot into your transport vessels without spilling a drop on your sandals. As you prepare to tip the heavy jar, a man steps up. He is a local merchant, maybe a fishmonger judging by the smell, which rivals your own. He nods at you, unbuckles his belt, and proceeds to contribute to your inventory right before your eyes. You have to wait. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night: the menu matters theory. Ancient fullers were connoisseurs of urine. Not all donations were considered equal. There is anecdotal evidence suggesting that fullers preferred the urine of heavy drinkers, men who consumed lots of wine, because it was believed to ferment into stronger, more potent alkali. Some sources even suggest that fullers would place their jars outside specific taverns known for strong wine, effectively targeting a high-quality demographic. As you watch the fishmonger, you wonder what he had for lunch. Garum? Cabbage? It all affects the chemical cocktail you are about to harvest. The merchant finishes, shakes his tunic down, and gives you a polite nod, as if he just tipped a waiter. All yours, his expression seems to say. You grunt a thank you. It's a transaction. He gave you waste. You gave him convenience. The economy of Rome is built on these small, weird exchanges. Now you have to pour. You grip the rim of the street jar. It's heavy, slick with condensation and other things. You heave it up. The liquid sloshes dangerously. You tilt it, aiming the stream into your amphora. The sound is distinct, a heavy, splashing glug. The smell intensifies as the liquid is agitated, releasing a fresh wave of ammonia gas that makes your eyes water. You try to hold your breath, but the exertion forces you to inhale. It is the taste of the city's kidneys. You realize that you are essentially collecting the filtered essence of Roman life. Their diets, their sicknesses, their hangovers, all distilled into this yellow fluid. This brings us to a point of academic friction that keeps archaeologists arguing in their storage depots. The amphora reuse debate. We find millions of broken amphorae across the Roman world. The famous Monte Testaccio in Rome is a literal mountain made of 53 million broken olive oil jars. For a long time, the prevailing theory championed by Heinrich Dressel was that amphorae were single-use containers, like plastic water bottles, discarded after the oil or wine was consumed because cleaning them was too difficult. However, a significant group of modern scholars argues that this is wasteful nonsense. They suggest that a massive secondary market existed. They argue that the jars used by fullers, like the ones you're filling right now, were recycled oil jars. The debate is, was the Roman economy a throwaway culture like ours, or was it a circular economy where a vessel that once held the finest olive oil was destined to end its life holding the foulest urine? As you struggle with the handle of your jar, noticing the old, faded stamp of an olive oil merchant on the clay, you side with the recyclers. This pot has seen better days, and certainly better liquids. You fill the first jar, then the second. The quiet struggle is a physical strain. Liquid is heavy. A full amphora can weigh over 50 pounds. You now have 100 pounds of urine to carry back to the shop. You hook them onto your yoke and stand up, though it digs into your shoulders. You wobble slightly. If you trip, if you fall, you will be covered in, well, let's not think about it. It would be a social and olfactory disaster from which you might never recover. You begin the walk back. You move carefully. Try to sync your steps with the sloshing of the jars to avoid spilling. You pass a bakery. The smell of fresh bread fights with the smell of your cargo. You pass a fountain where children are splashing. They stop and pinch their noses as you go by. You feel a strange, defensive pride. You are the reason their tunics are clean. You are the reason the senator looks like a god. They mock you, but they need you. You notice graffiti scratched into the plaster wall of a house as you pass. It reads, asterisk, full one's Ululamp Kano, non armavarunk. Asterisk, I sing of fullers and the owl, not of arms and the man. It's a parody of the opening line of the Aeneid. I sing of arms and the man. It's a joke, a bit of street snark mocking your profession. Even the graffiti artists are taking shots at you, but you keep walking. The quiet struggle is also about developing a thick skin. You can't be sensitive when you smell like this. You arrive back at the Falonica. The foreman is waiting. He points to the back of the shop to a row of large, open vats. You trudge over and pour your harvest into the main tank. It joins the gallons collected by other workers. The splashing sound echoes off the stone walls. But here's the catch. You can't use this urine yet. This leads to the final realization of the section. Fresh urine is useless for cleaning. It is sterile and slightly acidic. To become the powerful cleaning agent the Romans need, it has to rot. It has to sit in these open vats for days, baking in the heat until the urea breaks down into ammonia. The quiet struggle of the laundry isn't just collecting the waste. It's living with it while it ripens. You look at the vat. It is bubbling slightly as slow chemical fermentation. It is transforming from waste into gold. You wipe your hands on a rag. Your supply run complete. You have successfully navigated the streets, braved the judgment of the crowds, and harvested the resources of the city. You are tired, your shoulders ache, and you definitely need a bath. But there is no time for that. The toga you inspected earlier is waiting. The urine in the other vat, the aged vintage, is ready. And now, you have to do the unthinkable. You have to get in the pot. You have to become the washing machine. You are standing in front of the main fermentation vats at the back of the Falonica. You have just dumped your fresh harvest into the intake tank. But the foreman shakes his head and points you toward a different row of earthenware jars. These pots are covered with heavy wooden lids, sealed with wax or clay. He motions for you to open one. You hesitate. The smell leaking from the seal is already making your eyes water, and you haven't even cracked it yet. You grip the wooden handle, brace yourself, and heave the lid aside. If the street corner pot was a slap in the face, this is a punch to the gut. The fumes that rise from the open vat are visible, a shimmering, heat haze distortion in the air. This isn't just the smell of a bathroom anymore. It is the smell of a chemical weapon. You cough, waving your hand frantically to disperse the cloud. You're looking at vintage urine. Urine that has been sitting in the Roman heat for weeks, stewing, changing, and evolving. This is the secret sauce of the laundry trade. And understanding why it smells this way is a key to understanding how the Romans kept their civilization clean. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that explains a madness: the chemistry of decomposition. Fresh urine is actually sterile and mostly composed of water and urea. Urea is a waste product, harmless and relatively odorless. But urea is unstable. When it sits exposed to air and bacteria, it begins to break down. The bacteria produce an enzyme called urease, which attacks the urea and splits it into carbon dioxide. And here's the kicker: ammonia. Ammonia is a powerful alkali in a world without synthetic chemicals. This vat of rotting liquid is the closest thing the Romans have to a bottle of industrial-strength bleach. It dissolves grease, neutralizes acids, and whitens fabric. You are essentially looking at a biological factory that turns human waste into a cleaning superpower. You peer into the vat. The liquid is dark, almost amber. It is bubbling slightly, not from heat, but from the gas being released. It looks alive, and in a way it is. It is a teeming ecosystem of microscopic life, working hard to create the solvent that will save the senator's toga. You realize that the quiet struggle here is a struggle of patience. You cannot rush the rot. If you use the urine too early, it's just dirty water. If you wait too long, it evaporates. You have to catch it at the peak of its ammoniacal power. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night: the origin of ammonia. You might wonder where we got the word for this chemical. It actually comes from ancient Egypt, specifically the temple of Ammonius or Ammon in the Siwa oasis. The priests there kept large herds of camels. The camel dung and urine would pile up in the dry desert heat, and the soot from burning this dried dung as fuel would accumulate on the temple walls. This would contain white crystals that smelled sharp and biting. The Romans called it sal ammoniacus, salt of ammonius. It was ammonium chloride. So, every time you smell that sharp cleaning scent in a modern kitchen, you are linguistically referencing the bathroom habits of ancient Egyptian camels. The Romans didn't know the molecular formula, but they knew the connection between the salt of ammonius and the power of their own vats. You stir the vat with a long wooden paddle. The consistency is thicker than water. It feels heavy, almost syrupy. This is the gold of the laundry. The foreman watches you closely. He dips a finger in yes, really, and tastes it no, really. Or at least, he pretends to. He nods. It's ready. This particular batch has reached the perfect pH level. It is alkaline enough to turn the olive oil stains into soap, but not so caustic that it will dissolve the wool fibers completely. It is a delicate balance. A pH of 11 is perfect. A pH of 13 might leave the senator naked in the forum. As you stare at the swirling liquid, you start to think about the paradox of Roman hygiene. We tend to think of the Romans as the inventors of cleanliness, the baths, the aqueducts, the sewers. But their version of cleanliness was chemically aggressive. They didn't gently wash dirt away. They attacked it. They waged chemical warfare on grime. The air in the Phalanca is so rich in ammonia that it likely bleached the hair of the workers. You wonder if the blonde look was fashionable among laundry slaves, or just a sign of lung damage. Now, as you replace the lid to preserve the fumes, we reach a point of academic friction that keeps technological historians debating in their laboratories. The lye versus urine debate. While urine is the most famous Roman cleaning agent, thanks largely to the jokes about Vespasian's tax, a significant group of scholars argues that it wasn't the only one, or even the primary one for all stages. They point to archaeological evidence of ash pits in fooleries. Wood ash, when mixed with water, creates lye, potassium hydroxide, another powerful alkali. The debate is, did fullers use urine for everything, or did they use a dual system? Urine for degreasing and lye for whitening? Some experiments suggest that urine was excellent for fulling thickening the wool, and removing grease, while lye was better for bleaching. Others argue that urine was preferred simply because it was free, whereas with ash required burning fuel, which cost money. The quiet struggle of the historian is trying to reconstruct a recipe that was never written down because it was considered too common or too gross to record. You look at the ash pile in the corner and the urine vat in front of you. You suspect the answer is whatever was available. Today, the donations were plentiful. So today, it's a urine day. The psychological weight of the vat is immense. You are standing next to hundreds of gallons of human waste, and yet you feel a strange sense of respect for it. In a modern city, we flush this away instantly. We use millions of gallons of fresh water to transport out of sight. The Romans, constrained by resources, saw value in it. They saw chemistry where we see sewage. It is a lesson in sustainability, albeit a disgusting one. The quiet struggle. Here is the struggle to waste nothing. The senator eats the food, drinks the wine, produces the waste, and then that waste is used to clean the clothes he wore to the dinner. It is a perfect closed loop of consumption and purification. The foreman barks an order. It is time to move the liquid. You grab a bucket, a different one from the collection bucket, hopefully, and begin to ladle the ripe ammonia into a smaller transport vessel. The liquid splashes, sending up fresh clouds of gas. Your eyes sting, your throat burns, and you feel a headache forming behind your temples. This is the reality of the industry. The white toga is born in a cloud of poison. You carry the bucket toward the stalling vats, the washing tubs. These are smaller, individual basins set to floor or raised on masonry benches. They look like individual jacuzzis, but instead of hot water and bubbles, they are waiting for a mixture of this aged urine and water. You pour the amber liquid in. It swirls, mixing with the water to create a pale yellow, frothy bath. It looks innocuous. It looks like dirty bath water. But you know that chemically, it is ready to eat through grease, protein, and dignity. You pause for a moment, looking at the prepared bath. You have collected the raw material. You have aged it. You have mixed it. The chemistry is set. But chemistry alone is enough. The ammonia can loosen the dirt, but it can't shake it free. To get the grime out of the deep fibers of a toga pexa, you need mechanical agitation. You need force. And in the 1st century AD, there are no electric motors. There are no tumbling drums. There's only you. You look down at your legs. They are the only agitators this shop has. The foreman points to the tub. He points to the pile of dirty clothes. And then he points to you. The quiet struggle of waiting is over. The quiet struggle of walking is about to begin. You take a deep breath, unbuckle your sandals, and prepare to step into the most unpleasant foot spa in history. You are standing barefoot on the cold, wet concrete floor of the Falonica. The foreman has just dumped the armload of dirty togas, tunics, and cloaks into the pilaw, the washing tub. He looks at you, then at the tub, then back at you. There is no negotiation here. You take a breath, unhitch your tunic, and tuck it into your belt to turn it into a makeshift pair of shorts. Or perhaps you strip down to a subligaculum, a loincloth, and you step over the masonry lip. Your bare foot sinks into the mass of wet wool and warm liquid. The sensation is indescribable. It is slimy, heavy, and warm. The liquid, the mixture of water and stale, ammoniacal urine, squelches up between your toes. It feels thick, almost oily. This is a saponification happening in real time. As the alkali attacks the grease and the wool, it is literally turning the dirt into soap under your feet. You suppress a shudder, grab the low walls of the stall for balance, and bring your other foot in. You are now standing ankle deep in the chemical soup of Rome. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that transforms you from a laundry worker into a piece of industrial machinery. The Saltus Falonicus. This is a fuller's dance. In the ancient world, there were no mechanical agitators. There were no tumbling drums. To get the dirt out of the dense, heavy fibers of a toga, you needed kinetic energy. You needed to stomp. The fullers didn't just walk on the clothes. They performed a rhythmic, high-stepping march, lifting their knees high and driving their heels down into the fabric. It was a combination of marching in place and crushing grapes for wine, but instead of making a delicious vintage, You are making gray sludge. You begin to move. Asterisk squish. Splash. Squish. Splash. Asterisk the sound is wet and rhythmic. You drive your heel into the thick folds of the toga pexa. You can feel the resistance of the wool. It is heavy and sodden. The quiet struggle. Here is a struggle against drag. Wet wool is incredibly heavy. Every time you lift your leg, suction tries to hold your foot down. You are essentially doing high-intensity interval training in a vat of glue. Your calves start to burn within the first 2 minutes. Your quads tighten. You realize that the Fullers must have had the strongest legs in the empire. You look to your left and right. You are not alone. The washing stalls are arranged in a row, separated by low walls. Other men are stomping beside you. They are finding a rhythm together. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night: the wall hangers. If you look at the archaeological remains of fooleries in Pompeii, like the Phalanca of Stephanus, you see that the washing stalls are very narrow, often just wide enough for one person. But curiously, the side walls are often worn smooth or have specific handholds masonry into them. Why? Because the floor of the tub was treacherous. Between the slippery wool, the slimy soap grease mixture, and the vigorous jumping, it was incredibly easy to slip. And if you slipped, you fell face first into the cleaning fluid. The architecture was designed to keep you upright. You grip the side walls until your knuckles turn white, using your arms to leverage your weight down into your feet. You are effectively suspending yourself, acting as a human piston. The smell, which you thought you'd gotten used to, rises up with renewed vigor as you agitate the liquid. The splashing aerates the ammonia. It creates a localized cloud around your head. You try to breathe through your mouth, but you can taste the metallic tang of the air. Sweat begins to pour down your face, stinging your eyes. It mixes with the condensation in the room. You are wet from the outside in and the inside out. As you stomp, you feel the texture of the clothes changing. When you started, the toga felt stiff and greasy. Now, under the relentless assault of your heels and the chemical bite of the urine, the fibers are beginning to relax. The dirt is loosening. The water around your feet is turning a dark, murky gray. You are literally beating the city out of the cloth. Now, as you switch your rhythm to a double stomp to tackle a particularly stubborn stain, we reach a point of academic friction that keeps medical historians debating in their clinics. The Fuller skin debate. Common sense suggests that standing ankle deep in ammonia and rotting biological waste for 10 hours a day would be a dermatological nightmare. Historians have long assumed that Fuller suffered from terrible skin ulcers, chemical burns, and infections. Pliny the Elder mentions that Fullers were prone to certain ailments. However, a counter-argument exists among some medical anthropologists. They point out that urea, a component of urine, is actually used in modern skincare. It's a humectant that helps retain moisture, found in many expensive lotions today. Ammonia is also an antiseptic. Some scholars argue that while the smell was horrific, the Fullers might have actually had surprisingly fungus-free feet compared to the average Roman who walked barefoot in mud. The debate is, was the Fuller's tub a torture chamber for the skin, or was it an accidental, albeit disgusting, spa treatment that kept foot rot at bay? You look down at your own feet, which are currently invisible beneath the gray foam. You don't feel moisturized. You feel pruned. Your skin is wrinkling. The grit from the street dirt trapped in the toga acts like sandpaper. You are exfoliating your soles with Roman road dust. The monotony sets in. You have been stomping for an hour. The foreman hasn't signaled for a break. You start to lose track of time. The squish splash becomes a hypnotic metronome. To pass the time, the workers start to hum. It's a low, droning sound that harmonizes with the splashing. This is the ululaire, the wailing. It's not a sad song. It's a working song, designed to keep the pace. If everyone stomps at the same time, the work feels lighter. You find yourself falling into the beat. Left, right, left, right. You are part of a machine, made of meat. You think about the senator who owns this toga. He is probably sitting in a bath right now, being scrubbed with scented oil by a slave. He has no idea that his dignity is currently being trampled by your callous heels in a vat of pee. There is a strange intimacy in this violence. You are physically assaulting his clothes to save them. You are stomping on the symbol of his power. In a way, the Fuller is the only person in Rome who gets to trample on the Senate and get paid for it. The physical exertion is immense. Your heart is pounding. The humidity makes it hard to cool down. You are burning calories at an athlete's pace. This explains why the figures in Fuller frescoes always look muscular and fit. You can't be frail in this job. The heavy wet wool would swallow you whole. Finally, the foreman walks by and claps his hands. The dance is over. The wash cycle is complete. You stop. Your legs are trembling. The silence in the stall, broken only by the dripping of liquid, is sudden and jarring. You look down. The water is black. The toga is a sodden, gray mess. It looks ruined, but you know it isn't. The dirt is out of the fibers. It's just suspended in the liquid now. You grab the sidewalls and hoist yourself out of the tub. Your feet make a sucking sound as they leave the muck. You stand on the cool concrete, shivering slightly as the sweat on your skin starts to evaporate. You are exhausted, you smell terrible, and your feet are stained yellow-gray. But you look at the tub and see the cloud of dirt that is no longer in the clothes. You have won the first round. The grease is dissolved. The wine is loosened. The garum is neutralized. But you can't leave the clothes like this. If they dried now, they would be stiff, smelly, and gray. You have done the washing, but you haven't done the cleaning. You have to get the detergent out. You grab the heavy, dripping bundle of wet wool, which now weighs twice as much as it did before, and prepare to move it to the next station. The quiet struggle to stomp is finished, but the quiet struggle to rinse, the battle to wash away the smell of your own work, is just beginning. You hoist the sodden mass onto your shoulder, ignoring the warm trickle running down your back, and head toward the sound of rushing water. You are hauling the wet, sodden, and incredibly heavy carcass of the toga pexa across the slippery floor of the falonica. The garment is no longer dry and stiff. It is a limp, dripping mass that weighs about 40 pounds. Every step you take leaves a puddle of gray, ammoniacal sludge on the concrete, the smell clinging to you, and the toga is the sharp, unmistakable scent of the stomped tubs. You smell like a chemical accident, but as you move toward the back of the shop, a new sound begins to cut through the humid silence. It is the sound of rushing, gurgling, beautiful water. You arrive at the lacus, the rinsing tanks. These are a series of large, rectangular masonry basins, filled to the brim with crystal clear, cold water. The water is entering the tanks through a lead pipe in the wall, flowing in a steady, pressurized stream that creates a pleasing musical splash. After the stagnant, bubbling horror of the urine vats, this water looks like nectar from the gods. It is the lifeblood of the laundry, and without it, the Fuller is just a man with a bucket of pee. You heave the toga up, groaning under the wet weight, and drop it into the first rinsing tank. Splash. The pristine water is instantly violated. A cloud of dark gray, murky liquid billows out from the fabric, swirling and expanding like ink in a glass. This is the dirt, the grease, and the urine all releasing at once. The water turns opaque within seconds. You plunge your hands into the cold basin. The temperature shock is startling. Your feet are still burning from the chemical warmth of the stomped tub, but your hands are now being numbed by mountain snowmelt. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that makes the Roman laundry machine possible: the aqueducts. The falonica is a thirsty beast. It consumes thousands of gallons of water a day. This shop doesn't rely on a well or a bucket brigade. It is plugged directly into the imperial grid. The water flowing over your hands right now might travel 20 or 30 miles from the distant Apennine Mountains, carried on stone arches across valleys and through tunnels, just to end up here, washing the cleaning fluid out of a senator's underwear. The Romans were obsessed with flow. They didn't just want water. They wanted running water. This constant flush is the only thing that keeps the city from drowning in its own filth. You grab the heavy folds of the toga and begin to swish them back and forth. The quiet struggle. Here is the struggle against dilution. You can't just dunk it once. The urine has soaked deep into the core of the wool fibers. If you don't get it all out, the senator will smell like a stable the moment he starts sweating in the sun. You have to rinse, wring, and rinse again. You move the toga from the first dirty tank to the second, cleaner tank. The water here is clearer. You dunk it again. As you work, you notice the pipe delivering the water. It is made of thick gray lead. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night. The Calix, the Roman water department, the Statio Aquarum, was obsessed with preventing theft. They didn't just let you stick a pipe in the aqueduct. You had to buy a specific bronze nozzle called a calyx, which had a standardized diameter. This nozzle was stamped with the official seal of the watermaster. It was the ancient equivalent of a water meter. If a water inspector came by and found you using a pipe that was bigger than your calyx allowed, or if the stamp didn't match the records, you were fined heavily. You look at the pipe jutting from the wall. It has the official stamp. This shop is legal. It pays for its flow. The physical sensation of rinsing is hypnotic. The cold water soothes your skin, washing away the grit and the slime of the stomped tub. But it is also freezing. Roman water was famously cold. Pliny often bragged about how refreshing it was. After 10 minutes of plunging your arms and up to the elbows, your fingers start to feel stiff and clumsy. You are suffering from localized hypothermia in the middle of a heat wave. You pull the toga out of the second tank. The water running off it is now pale, almost clear. The smell of ammonia has faded from a shout to a whisper. It still smells like wet wool, that distinct musky animal scent, but the sharp bite of the urine is gone. The chemistry has done its job. Now the hydrology is doing its. But now, we reach a point of academic friction that keeps hydraulic engineers and historians arguing in their blueprints. The water theft debate. For a long time, historians believed that the Roman water administration was a model of efficiency and law. Frontinus, the famous water commissioner, wrote a whole book about it. But modern scholars, looking closer at the archaeological evidence, argue that the system was riddled with corruption. They suggest that puncturing, illegally tapping the main lines, was rampant, especially for high water industries like fooleries. The debate is, was the Falonica a legitimate customer or was it a parasite? Some archaeologists argue that the sheer number of fooleries in Pompeii would have drained the public supply dry if they were all legal. They suggest that foolers often bribed the aquarii, the watermen, to look the other way while they installed off-the-books pipes. You look at the pipe in the wall again. Is that stamp real? Or is it a clever forgery paid for with a few amphorae of wine? In Rome, even the water has a criminal record. You drag the toga to the third and final tank. This is the polishing rinse. The water here is drinkable. In fact, you see a fellow worker cup his hand and take a sip from the inlet before dunking a tunic. You push the heavy wool under the surface. It billows lazily. It looks white, or at least whiter than it was. The gray film of the city is gone. The yellowing of the grease is gone. Now comes the hardest part of the rinsing phase. The wringing. You cannot hang a dripping wet toga up to dry. The weight of the water would stretch the wool out of shape, turning a majestic garment into a saggy bag. You have to get the water out now. But you can't just squeeze a bundle this big with your hands. You need torque. You call over another worker. The two of you grab the opposite ends of the toga. You gather the fabric into a thick rope. Then you begin to walk in opposite circles. You are twisting the fabric. This is the torsion method. The wool tightens. The water begins to squeeze out, cascading on the floor in a sudden, heavy shower. You twist harder. The fabric groans. Your forearms burn. You are fighting the water tension of the wool. This is the quiet struggle of physics. You have to apply enough force to expel the water, but not so much that you tear the wet fibers. It is a delicate, muscular dance. You twist until the fabric feels hard as wood, tight and ropey. Then, on a count of 3, you both release the tension slightly, shake it out, and fold it. The toga is now damp, not dripping. It feels lighter, perhaps only 25 pounds now instead of 40. You wipe your wet hands on your tunic. The rinsing is done. The ammonia is washed away, flowing down the drain and back into the sewer system, completing the circle of filth. You look at the toga. It is clean in the sense that the dirt is gone, but it isn't finished. It looks rough. The nap is matted down. It looks like a dead sheep. To make it the gleaming symbol of the Senate, it needs to be beaten. It needs to be tortured a little bit more. You pick up the damn bundle. The smell of the room has shifted from the sharp ammonia of the front to the damp, earthy smell of wet wool and cold stone. It's a cleaner smell, but a colder one. You shiver slightly. You are ready for the next station. You are heading toward the sound of rhythmic thumping. You are heading to the beating tables, where you'll trade the cold water for a wooden bat. You have successfully rinsed the ammonia out of the toga, twisting the heavy fabric until your forearms burn to expel the excess water. Now, you carry the damp, ropey bundle to a new station, the beating tables. These are massive, solid slabs of hardwood, scarred and polished by years of violence. You lay the toga out flat. It looks clean, in the sense that the mud and grease are gone, but it looks pathetic. The wool is limp. The weave looks loose and ragged from the stomping. It looks like a dead animal that has been dragged through a river. To bring it back to life, you have to beat it. You reach for your tool. It is a heavy wooden bat, shaped somewhat like a cricket bat or a flat club. It is smooth from use, the handle darkened by the sweat of 1,000 shifts. You take a breath, set your feet, and swing. Thwack. The sound is dull and wet. You swing again. Thwack. And again. Thwack. You are not hitting it with rage. You are hitting it with rhythm. You are entering the quiet struggle of the percussionist. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that explains why you are currently assaulting a piece of clothing. The process of fulling. The word fuller, Latin, fullo, actually refers specifically to this process of thickening cloth. Wool is unique. Under the microscope, wool fibers have tiny scales. When you subject damp wool to friction and pressure, like stomping or beating, those scales open up and lock together. The fabric shrinks, but also becomes denser, stronger, and more waterproof. This is called felting. A brand new toga fresh off the loom is loose and airy. A toga that has been fulled is a solid shield of fabric. You are literally beating the fibers into submission, forcing them to hold hands so tight they can never let go. You find a tempo. Asterisk hit. Lift. Hit. Lift. Asterisk the water trapped deep in the yarn sprays out in a fine mist with every strike. You are working your way down the length of the garment. The quiet struggle. Here is the struggle against vibration. Every time the bat hits the wet wool, a shock wave travels up the handle and into your wrist and elbow. It is a repetitive stress injury waiting to happen. You have to keep your grip loose, letting the weight of the wood do the work. If you grip too tight, your hands will be claws by sunset. The sound in this part of the shop is deafening. It isn't just you. There are 4 other men at tables nearby, all beating tunics and cloaks. The air is filled with a chaotic, thundering drumbeat. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night. The Saluma. The Romans were believers in the power of the beat. Just as galley slaves rode to the sound of a drum or a flute, manual laborers often worked to a rhythmic chant called a Saluma. It was a work shanty. The foreman, or perhaps one of the older workers, starts a low, chanting song. It's nonsense lyrics, mostly grunts and rhythmic syllables designed to coordinate the strikes. Osteriskaya? Viri, asterisk, come on, man, asterisk thwack, thwack. Asterisk you fall into the syncopation. The collective rhythm transforms a chaotic noise into a bizarre industrial music. You are part of the percussion section of the Pompeii Philharmonic. As you beat the fabric, you see the transformation happening. The weave is tightening up. The toga is shrinking slightly, becoming more substantial. It is starting to look less like a rag and more like a garment. You're also knocking out any last remaining particles of solid dirt, sand, or dried mud that survived the washing. They fly out like dust from a rug. But the noise you are making isn't staying inside the shop. The Philharmonica has opened doors. The sound of the beating spills out into the street. This brings us to a point of academic friction that keeps sensory historians arguing in their soundproof offices. The noise of Rome debate. We tend to imagine ancient ruins as silent, ghostly places. But ancient Rome was notoriously, maddeningly loud. The poet Marshall famously complained that he couldn't sleep because of the noise of the city. The coppersmiths banging their hammers, the money changers shouting, and yes, the fullers beating their cloth. Some historians argue that Rome was a sonic hellscape, where silence was the ultimate luxury of the rich, who built their villas with thick walls and interior courtyards to escape the din. Others argue that the Romans didn't have the same cultural expectation of quiet that we do, and that the noise was seen as a sign of vitality and prosperity. The debate is, was the sound of your bat an annoyance of neighbors, or was it just the background white noise of urban life? You glance at the open front of the shop. You see a pedestrian pause, look in, and then hurry past, covering his ears. You suspect Marshall was right. You are the neighbor from hell. The physical toll of the beating is different from the stomping. The stomping was cardio. This is endurance weightlifting. Your shoulders burn. Your triceps scream. You have to be careful not to hit the same spot too many times, or you'll wear a hole right through the expensive wool. You are walking a fine line between strengthening the fabric and destroying it. You have to red the cloth with every strike. Is it tight enough? Is it uniform? You are a sculptor, but your chisel is a club. You finish one side of the toga and flip it over. The wet wool makes a heavy slap against the wood. You start again. Asterisk thwack. Thwack. Asterisk monotony is hypnotic. Your mind drifts. You think about the Saluma. You wonder if the galley slaves have better songs. You wonder if the gladiators have songs. You realize that the entire empire runs on rhythm. The marching of the legions, the hammering of the smiths, the beating of the fullers. It is a heartbeat of force. Finally, the fabric feels right. It is dense, firm, and uniform. You stop. The silence rushes back in, ringing in your ears. You drop the bat. Your hand is stuck in a claw shape for a moment before you force your fingers open. You rub your elbow. You look at the toga. It is clean. It is tight, but it is still dingy. This is the heartbreaking reality of wool. Even after the urine, the water, and the beating, natural wool has a yellowish, creamy tint. It isn't white. And for a Roman senator running for office, creamy isn't good enough. He needs candidus, shining, blinding white. He needs to glow in the dark. You can't achieve that with physical force. You need chemistry again, but not the wet, organic chemistry of the urine vats. You need the dry, choking chemistry of the underworld. You grab the damp, beaten toga. You are leaving the noisy, wet main room. You are heading to a small, enclosed room at the back of the shop. A room with no windows. A room that smells like a volcano. The quiet struggle of the beat is over. The quiet struggle of the breath is about to begin. You are going to the bleaching room to play with fire and brimstone. You leave the rhythmic, thundering noise of the beating tables behind you, carrying the damp, compacted toga in your arms. Your ears are ringing, your elbows are throbbing, and your feet are still stained gray from the urine tubs. You might think the worst is over. You might think that surely, after the pee and the beating, the garment is clean enough, but you would be wrong. The toga is clean, yes, but it is not white. It still retains the creamy, yellowish hue of natural sheep's wool. For a Roman politician, cream is the color of failure. To win an election, he needs to shine like a star. To achieve that, you have to take this garment to the most dangerous room in the shop. You are going to the suffibulum, the bleaching room. You step into a small, windowless chamber at the back of the Phalanca. The air here is different. It is dry, stifling, and carries a faint, lingering scent that makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. It smells like a volcano. It smells like the underworld. It smells of sulfur, what the ancients called brimstone. In the center of the room stands a strange, bell-shaped contraption made of wicker. It looks like a giant, headless beehive. This is a Verminia cavia, the wicker cage. You drape the damp toga over this frame, spreading it out carefully so that the fumes can reach every square inch of fabric. The frame keeps the wool taut and open, creating a tent. Underneath this tent on the floor is a small ceramic pot. This is the crucible of whiteness. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that explains the chemistry of your cough. Sulfur bleaching. The Romans didn't have chlorine bleach. Instead, they discovered that when you burn elemental sulfur, it releases a gas called sulfur dioxide. When this gas hits the water still trapped in the damp wool, it dissolves to form a weak sulfurous acid. This acid doesn't just clean the dirt. It chemically alters the pigment molecules in the wool, stripping away the yellow and leaving behind a stark, spectral white. You are essentially fumigating the clothes. It is the ancient equivalent of nuking it. You reach into a pouch at your belt and pull out a handful of yellow, crumbly rocks. They feel chalky and greasy at the same time. This is pure sulfur, mined from the volcanic field of Sicily or the area around Mount Vesuvius itself, which, unbeknownst to you, is currently a ticking time bomb just a few miles away. You place the rocks into the ceramic pot under the wicker frame. Now comes the quiet struggle of the match. You strike a spark using flint and steel, catching a piece of tinder. You drop it into the pot. The sulfur catches fire. It doesn't burn like with a happy orange flame. It burns an eerie, ghostly blue light. And immediately, it begins to produce a thick, choking white smoke. You have to move fast. The moment that smoke hits the air, it turns into poison. You scramble backward, coughing. The gas hits your throat, and it feels like you just swallowed a handful of needles. It turns the moisture in your eyes into acid. You are crying, choking, and stumbling toward the door. This is the quiet struggle of the bleaching room. The struggle to hold your breath while doing your job. You are creating an atmosphere that is hostile to human life in order to make a shirt look nice. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night: the adulterer in the cage. The wicker frame of the fuller was a well-known object in Roman daily life, so much so that it became a trope in literature. In Apuleius's famous novel The Golden Ass, there's a scene where a woman is having an affair with a lover when her husband, a fuller, comes home early. In a panic, she hides the lover under the wicker cage, the very one you are using right now. The husband, unaware, decides to get some work done and lights the sulfur under the frame. The lover is essentially fumigated like a bedbug. He starts sneezing and choking, revealing his hiding spot. It's a scene of dark comedy. But standing here with your lungs burning, you realize it wasn't just a funny story. It was a torture method. You slam the heavy wooden door of the bleaching room shut and seal it with a latch. You lean against the wall, gasping for the relatively fresh air of the main shop, which still smells like urine, but compared to sulfur dioxide, urine smells like roses. You can see the white smoke curling under the crack of the door. You have to leave the toga in there for hours. The gas needs time to work its magic, penetrating deep into the fibers, bleaching out the last of the natural sheep color. While you wait for your breath to return, you wipe the tears from your face. The danger of this job is real. This brings us to a point of academic friction that keeps medical historians arguing in their clinics. The ancient PP debate. Did the Romans protect themselves? We tend to think of ancient workers as expendable, toiling away with zero safety gear. But Pliny the Elder, in his Natural History, mentions that workers who process vermilion, a toxic mercury pigment, will wear masks of loose bladder skin over their faces to avoid inhaling the dust. Some historians argue that fullers might have used similar rudimentary gas masks, perhaps with sponges or polished animal bladders, when working in the sulfur room. Others argue that Pliny was describing a rare exception for a high-value artist, and that the average fuller just held his breath and hoped for the best. The debate is, did the Romans understand occupational health and safety, or did they just assume that coughing up blood was part of the job description? As you rub your stinging eyes, you really wish you had one of those bladder masks right now. The psychological weight of the whiteness is worth noting. In Rome, Candidus, dazzling white, wasn't just a color, it was a moral state. A candidate running for office wore a chalk-white toga to symbolize his purity, his honesty, and his lack of corruption. The irony, of course, is that to achieve that symbol of purity, you had to subject the cloth to the fumes of hell. The white toga is a lie. It is a product of urine and brimstone. It is an illusion created by men like you, choking in a dark room. You wait. The sun moves across the sky outside. The shop continues its noisy rhythm of stomping and beating, but the bleaching room remains silent. Inside that sealed chamber, a chemical war is being waged. The sulfur is eating the color. The gas is swirling around the wicker cage, turning the gray, beaten wool into something that will catch the sun in the forum and blind the plebeians. Finally, the time is up. You take a deep breath, filling your lungs to capacity, and unlatch the door. You rush in. The smoke has mostly settled, but the air is still acrid. You grab the toga off the frame. It feels warm and dry now. You run out of the room, dragging the fabric with you and slam the door again. You burst into main courtyard and throw the toga onto an inspection table. You unfold it, and there it is. The transformation is miraculous. The dingy, yellowish wool is gone. In its place is a garment of startling, ghostly whiteness. It glows. It looks crisp. It looks like it has never been worn, never been touched by mud or wine. The sulfur has stripped it of its history. But as you run your hand over the fabric, you notice something new. The process has left the wool feeling a bit harsh. It's dry. It feels almost brittle. And despite the whiteness, there is still a faint, lingering smell of the chemical fire. More importantly, while the chemical stains are gone, the texture isn't quite right. The nap, the fluffiness of the wool, has been matted down by the water and the beating. It looks flat. Also, there is a strain problem. In removing the grease, you have made the wool too clean. It feels stripped. And paradoxically, sometimes the best way to make something look perfect is to make it a little bit dirty again. You look at the pile of white clay sitting in the corner. It is time for the next step. You have washed it with pee, rinsed it with water, beaten it with wood, and smoked it with sulfur. Now, you're going to rub dirt on it. But not just any dirt. You're going to use the finest, most expensive dirt in the Mediterranean. The quiet struggle of the smoke is over. The quiet struggle of the dust is about to begin. You stand at the finishing table, looking down at the toga. It has survived the ammonia stomp, the cold water shock, the wooden beating, and the sulfur fumigation. It is cleaner and whiter than it has any right to be. But as you run your fingers over the fabric, you feel a lingering slickness in a few spots. Microscopic residues of olive oil that manage to survive the chemical assault. Or perhaps the wool just looks a little too naked, a little too stripped by the sulfur. To fix this, you are about to do something that feels completely insane to a modern mind. You are going to take your freshly laundered, premium white garment and rub dirt all over it. You walk over to a row of heavy sacks in the corner of the shop. They are stamped with the seal of a merchant from the AG&C. You dip a wooden scoop into the open mouth of the sack and pull out a pile of fine, silky, snow-white powder. It looks like flour or perhaps the finest marble dust. This is Creta Simolia, Simolean earth. And in the world of Roman laundry, this is the magic dust that separates the amateurs from professionals. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that explains the geology of your job. Fuller's earth. The Romans didn't have synthetic dry cleaning solvents like perchloroethylene. Instead, they used nature's sponge. Simolean earth is a specific type of clay, calcium montmorillonite, mined on the small Greek island of Kimolos. It has a miraculous property, adsorption. Unlike a sponge that absorbs water into itself, this clay attracts grease molecules to its surface. When you rub it onto the wool, the microscopic clay particles act like tiny magnets, pulling the remaining oil out of the fibers and locking it away. You are essentially dry cleaning the toga with pulverized rock. You sprinkle the white dust over the fabric. It hangs in the air, creating a ghostly haze in the shaft of sunlight coming through the door. You begin to rub it in. The sensation is strange. The clay sucks the moisture right out of your skin. Your hands feel instantly dry and papery. You work the powder into the weave, focusing on the areas that were heavily stained with sweat or food. The quiet struggle. Here is the struggle against intuition. Every instinct you have screams that you are making a mess. You are covering a white shirt in dust. But as you rub, you see the magic happen. The faint, translucent grease spots disappear, absorbed by the hungry earth. But there is another reason for this dust. It isn't just a cleaner. It is a cosmetic. The toga candida needs a shine. By rubbing this stark white clay into the fibers, you are literally painting the fabric. You are filling in the microscopic gaps in the wool with bright white pigment. It's like applying foundation to a face to hide the pores. When the senator walks into the forum tomorrow, he won't just be clean. He will be coated in a thin, reflective layer of Greek island geology. He will literally be brighter than his surroundings. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night. The counterfeit clay ring. Because Simolean earth was so valuable, it had to be shipped all the way from Greece. It was a prime target for fraud. Pliny the Elder complains bitterly about unscrupulous merchants in Rome who would cut the expensive simoleon clay with cheap local limestone dust or chalk. The fake stuff didn't absorb grease. It just made the clothes dusty. Experienced fullers like the foreman watching you had to be experts in spotting the fake. How? They tasted it. Real simoleon earth has a specific fatty mouthfeel and sticks to the tongue in a way that dry limestone doesn't. You watch the foreman take a pinch of your batch, put on his tongue, and nod approvingly. You are grateful that your job is rubbing, not tasting, as you work the dust into the hem. You are participating in a global trade network. The urine is local, the water is local, but the dust is international. Rome's whiteness is dependent on a hole in the ground in the Aegean Sea. If the ships stop coming, the togas turn beige. It is a fragile kind of purity. Now, as you sneeze from a rising cloud of white powder, we reach a point of academic friction that keeps textile archaeologists debating in their labs. The wet versus dry debate. We know the Romans used fuller's earth, but when did they use it? Some historians, translating ancient recipes, argue that the clay was actually mixed into urine tubs at the beginning, turning the liquid into a slurry or mud bath that scoured the clothes. They argue that using it dry would just leave the wearer covered in dust. However, another group of scholars argues that it was strictly a finishing step, applied dry or as a damp paste to whiten cloth after washing, much like we might use talcum powder on a stain today. They point to the fact that Pliny describes it as a final polish. The debate is, was the clay the soap or was it the makeup? You are currently applying it dry, siding with the makeup theory, mostly because the idea of stomping in a mud urine slushy is too depressing to contemplate. The sensory experience of clay is suffocating in a quiet way. The sulfur room burned your lungs. The clay room dries them out. You feel the dust coating the inside of your nose. You cough, and a small puff of white smoke comes out. You look like a ghost. Your arms are white up to the elbows. You look around at the other workers. They are all ghostly figures, silent and pale, rubbing dust into clothes. It looks like a ritual in the underworld. You finish rubbing the clay into the toga. It now looks matte and powdery. The shine is gone, replaced by a flat, chalky whiteness. But you can't send it out like this. If the senator sat down on a velvet chair, he would leave a white butt print, which would be a political disaster. You need to get the excess dust off. But more importantly, you need to fix the texture. Remember the beading? It tightened the weave, but it also matted down the fibers. The toga currently looks flat and lifeless, like a piece of paper. To make it luxurious, to make it soft and fuzzy again, you need to raise the nap. You need to tease the tiny wool fibers back up so they catch the light. You can't do this with your hands. You need a tool that is sharp, spiky, and distinctly low-tech. You look at the wall where the finishing tools hang. You don't see a brush. You see the skin of a dead animal. Or, if you are lucky, a dried plant that looks like a medieval weapon. The quiet struggle of the dust is over. The grease is trapped in clay. Now you have to scrape it all off. You are about to engage in the prickliest part of the job. You are reaching for the hedgehog. You are standing at the finishing table, holding a tool that looks less like a laundry implement and more like something a gladiator would use in a desperate bar fight. The toga lies before you, coated in the fine white dust of the simoleon earth. It looks clean, yes, but it looks dead. The vibrant, fluffy texture of the wool has been crushed flat by the stomping feet and the wooden bats. It looks like felt, dense, hard, and unappealing. To restore its luxury, to make it soft enough to drape elegantly over a senator's shoulder, you have to raise the nap. You have to tease the individual fibers back up from their matted slumber. And to do that, you are going to use the skin of a hedgehog. You look at the object in your hand. It is a cured pelt, stretched over a small wooden frame to create a handle. The spines are still attached. They are stiff, sharp, and pointed. This is the tergumacini. It feels barbaric. You are about to rake these spikes across a garment that costs more than your entire family. But you trust the process. You gently lower the spikes onto the fabric and begin to pull. Asterisk scritch. Scratch. Scritch. Asterisk. The sound is distinctive, a dry, rhythmic rasping. As you drag the spines across the surface of the wool, Two things happen simultaneously. First, the excess white clay dust is kicked up into the air, creating a small, localized fog bank around your hands. Second, the flattened wool fibers are snagged by the spines and pulled upright. It is like brushing hair, but with much higher stakes. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that defines the texture of the Roman world: the obsession with the nap. The Romans didn't value smooth, shiny fabrics in the same way we value silk or satin today. For a man's toga, they prize a texture called pexa, woolly, soft, and voluminous. A toga with a good nap was warmer, which mattered in the drafty basilicas, but it also looked richer. It held the dye better, if it was colored, and it caught the light in a soft, diffused way. A bald toga, toga rasa, was considered threadbare and cheap. You are literally brushing value back into cloth. You work your way down the hem. The quiet struggle. Here is the struggle of pressure control. If you press too hard, the hedgehog spines will tear right through the yarn, shredding the toga into expensive confetti. If you press too light, you won't raise the nap, and the toga will remain flat. You have to find the Goldilocks zone of abrasion. You're performing microsurgery with a cactus. As you work, you notice a small snag. You freeze. You carefully lift the tool. You use a small pair of bronze tweezers, parter kit, to tuck the loose thread back in. Then you continue. Scritch. Scratch. The dust flies. The wool rises. It's oddly satisfying. You are watching the fabric transform from a piece of canvas into a cloud. But hedgehogs are hard to catch, and they are small. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night: the hedgehog law. The demand for hedgehog skins in the laundry trade was so massive that it actually required government regulation. Pliny the Elder, our favorite encyclopedist of weird facts, writes that the Senate passed specific laws regarding the trade and monopoly of hedgehog skins. There were literal cartels built around the supply of roadkill. Imagine a black market run by rough men in dark alleys, whispering, "Hey kid, you looking for some premium spines?" It sounds ridiculous, but in an economy dependent on wool, the hedgehog was a strategic resource. However, not every fuller could afford a steady supply of dead hedgehogs. You look over at the apprentice at the next table. He is using a different tool. He is holding a dried plant head. It looks like a pine cone covered in hooks. This is a carduus or a teasel plant, specifically Dipsacus sativus. This brings us to the botanical side of the trade. The teasel plant was cultivated specifically for this moment. Its dried flower head is covered in stiff, hook bracts that are perfect for snagging wool. This is where we get the word carding wool, from the Latin carduus thistle. You watch the apprentice work. The plant is gentler than the hedgehog. It's less likely to tear the fabric, but it wears out faster. The hooks break off. He has to swap out the plant head every few minutes. You look back at your hedgehog. It's durable. It's brutal. It's the industrial choice. This leads to a point of academic friction that keeps economic historians debating in their archives. The plant versus animal debate. We know both tools were used. But which one was dominant? Some historians argue that the hedgehog laws imply that animal skins were the standard and the plant was a poor man's substitute. They suggest that the spiny skin mentioned in text was a hallmark of a professional shop. However, agricultural historians argue that cultivating teasels was far more scalable than hunting hedgehogs. They suggest that by the imperial period, the industry must have shifted to plants to keep up with the population boom. The debate is, was the Roman laundry powered by agriculture, plants, or hunting hedgehogs? As you pull a broken spine out of the weave with your fingernail, you suspect that the hedgehog era might be ending. It's just too messy. The sensory experience of the brushing is dusty. The simoleon earth you rubbed in earlier is now airborne. You sneeze. The dust coats your eyelashes. But as it leaves the fabric, it takes the last of the grease with it. The clay did its job. It absorbed the oil, and now you are evicting the clay. The toga that emerges from under your brush is no longer chalky. It is bright, clean, and impossibly soft. You run your hand over the finished section. It feels luxurious. It feels like the coat of a living animal again. You have successfully reversed the damage of the washing process. You have resurrected the wool. But there is a final danger. You reach the purple stripe, the clavis. You slow down. You switch to a finer, softer brush, perhaps one made of stiff bristles rather than spines. You cannot risk raising the nap too much here, or you might blur the sharp line between the purple and the white. The crispness of that line is a status symbol. A blurry stripe looks sloppy. You hold your breath, making tiny, precise strokes. Asterisk scritch. Scritch. Asterisk perfect. The line holds. You finish the entire garment. Your arm is tired from the repetitive motion. Your nose is clogged with white dust. The hedgehog skin is clogged with white fluff. You tap it against the table to clean it. Asterisk thump. Thump. Asterisk a cloud of lint falls out. This is a material that didn't survive the process. The weak fibers that were culled to make the strong ones look better. You step back to admire your work. The toga is now clean, thanks to urine. White, thanks to sulfur. And soft, thanks to the hedgehog. It looks magnificent, but it looks messy. It is a pile of soft white fabric, but has no shape. It is wrinkled from the handling. It looks like a very expensive unmade bed. To make it fit for a senator, it needs structure. It needs to be pressed. But the Romans didn't have hot irons. They didn't have ironing boards. Instead, they had a machine that looked like a medieval torture device. A machine that used crushing pressure to force the wool into submission. You pick up the soft, fluffy, dusty bundle. You are heading to the final station of the Phalanca. You are heading to the pressorium. The quiet struggle of the brush is over. The quiet struggle of the screw is about to begin. You're going to squeeze this toga until it looks like a piece of marble sculpture. You are standing before the pressorium, the machine room of the Phalanca. In your arms, you hold the toga. It is white, it is clean, and thanks to the hedgehog, it is soft. But it is also a chaotic, wrinkled mess. It looks like a cloud that has lost its shape. To a Roman senator, soft is good, but sloppy is fatal. He needs his garment to have sharp, architectural lines. He needs creases that look like they were carved out of marble. To achieve this, you have to subject this delicate bundle of wool to the crushing force of the most advanced piece of technology in the shop. You look up at the machine. It towers over you, a massive wooden frame reaching almost the ceiling. This is a torcular, the screw press. It consists of two heavy oak uprights, a fixed base, and a heavy wooden block that moves up and down, driven by two massive wooden screws. It looks identical to the presses used on olive farms to crush the oil out of fruit, or in vineyards to crush grapes. The Romans, in their infinite pragmatism, looked at a machine designed to pulverize food and thought. That would be perfect for my laundry. You lay the toga onto the bottom board of the press. This brings us to the quiet struggle of the fold. You cannot just stuff the garment in there. The toga is a complex geometric shape, a semicircle roughly 18 feet long. You have to fold it with the precision of an origami master. You have to anticipate exactly where the sinus, the sweeping drape across the chest, and the umbo, the waist clump, will fall. If you press a crease in the wrong place, the senator will look lopsided when he puts it on, and no amount of draping will fix it. You carefully align the hem. You smooth out the fabric. You are building the garment's memory. Once the press clamps down, these lines will be set in stone. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that changed the world of mechanics. The screw. It sounds simple to us. We have screws in every piece of furniture we own, but in the ancient world, the screw was high-tech engineering, attributed to the genius of Archimedes, or perhaps developed earlier by the Greeks. The screw allowed for conversion of rotational force into massive linear pressure. Before the screw, presses used heavy stones or wedges, which were clumsy and dangerous. The screw gave you control. You could dial in the pressure to the millimeter. You're operating the cutting edge of first-century robotics. You place a smooth wooden board, the tympana, on top of the folded toga. Then, you place another toga, folded, then another board. You are making a laundry sandwich. The press can handle 5 or 6 garments at once. When the stack is high enough, it reaches the bottom of the movable block. Now you need muscle. You call over the apprentice. The two of you grab the vectus, the long wooden handle that turns the screws. You begin to walk in a circle, pushing the handle. Creak, groan. The sound of wood on wood is deafening. The massive screws turn slowly, driving the block down. Creak, snap. The pressure begins to build. You feel the resistance fighting back against your chest. You lean your entire body weight into the handle. The quiet struggle. Here is the struggle against compression. You are squeezing the air out of the wool. You are forcing the fibers, which you just spent an hour fluffing up with a hedgehog, to lie down flat and uniform. It seems counterintuitive, but this pressure is what gives a cloth its finish. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night: the gloss of pressure. The Romans had a specific word for the sheen of a freshly pressed toga. Niter. When wool fibers are pressed under extreme weight, they flatten out. This flat surface reflects light better than a round fiber. A well-pressed toga didn't just look flat. It literally shined. It had a glossy, almost metallic luster that screamed expensive. If you see a statue of a Roman emperor and his robes look slick and polished, the sculptor is trying to capture this exact effect. The niter created by the crushing weight of the torcular. You give the handle one last, straining shove. The veins in your neck bulge. The wood screams in protest. Then you stop. You lock the handle in place with a rope. The machine is now holding thousands of pounds of pressure. You step back, breathing heavily, wiping sweat from your eyes. Now you have to wait. The togas need to cook under the pressure for hours to set the creases. As you stare at the groaning machine, we reach a point of academic friction that keeps industrial archaeologists arguing in their workshops. The hot versus cold debate. We know they use pressure, but did they use heat? A modern iron works by combining heat and pressure to relax the molecular bonds in the fabric. Some historians argue that the Romans must have used heated metal plates inserted between the wooden boards to act as a giant multi-layered iron. They point to the discovery of thick metal sheets in some excavations that could have been heated in a fire. However, other scholars argue that this is too dangerous. Putting red-hot metal next to expensive, dry wool in a wooden press is a recipe for a very expensive bonfire. They argue that the Romans used cold pressing, relying solely on time and extreme pressure to set the fabric, much like pressing a flower in a book. The debate is, was the pressorium a giant toaster or just a giant vise? You look at the wooden screw. It looks flammable. You suspect the cold press theory might be the safer bet for keeping your job. The room is filled with the sound of the machine settling. Little pops and creaks as the wood adjusts to the strain. You take a moment to rest. This machine is the only thing in the shop that does the work for you. For the last few hours, you would machine the stomper, the twister, the beater. Now, finally, simple mechanics has taken over. You watch the dust motes dancing in the shaft of light, hitting the press. The air here smells different. It smells of warm wood and finished laundry. That distinct, clean, slightly heated smell of pressed cloth. It's the smell of order. The chaos of the urine vat is gone. The violence of the beating table is gone. All that is left is geometry and pressure. After a few hours, the foreman nods. It's time. You untie the rope. You grab the handle and begin to turn it the other way. The tension releases with a loud crack. The screws wind up. The block lifts. You carefully slide out the first board. You lift the toga. It has transformed again. It is no longer a fluffy cloud. It is a structured masterpiece. It is flat, crisp, and substantial. The creases where you folded it are razor sharp. The surface has that distinct niter, a subtle, satin-like sheen. It looks like a piece of architecture made of wool. You hold it up. It holds its shape. When the senator wraps this around himself, the folds will fall exactly as they should. The sinus will loop perfectly under his right arm. The umbo will tuck securely at his waist. You haven't just cleaned his clothes. You have engineered his silhouette. You fold it one last time, careful not to disturb the new creases. You place it on the delivery table. It is done. The physical journey of the toga is complete. It has gone from dirty and greasy to wet and smelly, to beaten and battered, to smoked and bleached, to dusty and brushed, and finally, to crushed and polished. It has been through a cycle of abuse that would destroy a lesser garment. But while the cleaning is done, the transaction is not. You still have to get it back to the owner. And more importantly, the shop has to pay its dues. You might think that collecting urine from the street is a free business model, but in Rome, nothing is truly free. The emperor knows you are making money from that pee, and he wants his cut. The quiet struggle of the machine is over. The quiet struggle of the bureaucracy is about to begin. You are about to learn that money doesn't smell, but it definitely sticks. You leave the crushing silence of the Presorium and walk back toward the front of the shop. The air here is lighter, mixing the faint ammonia sting of the back rooms with the street smells of baking bread and dust. You wipe your hands on a rag. Try to remove the last of clay dust and wool grease. You have finished the manual labor. The toga is clean, pressed, and folded, looking like a block of white marble on the delivery table. But your job isn't done. Now, you have to deal with the second most painful part of the laundry business, right after the sulfur smoke, the overhead. Standing at the entrance of the shop, blocking the sunlight with his wide frame and self-important posture, is a man holding a wax tablet and a stylus. He isn't a customer. He isn't a supplier. He is a publicanus, a tax collector, or perhaps an agent of the local municipal magistrate. He is looking at your urine vats with the same greedy intensity that a banker looks at a vault of gold bars. To you, those pots are full of waste. To him, they are full of taxable assets. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that is arguably the most famous toilet anecdote in human history: Emperor Vespasian's urine tax. In the 1st century AD, the Roman treasury was empty, drained by the excesses of Nero and a brutal civil war. The new emperor, Vespasian, was a pragmatic, no-nonsense soldier who needed cash fast to rebuild the city and build the Colosseum. So, he instituted the vectigal urine, a tax on the collection of urine from public latrines. When his son Titus complained that taxing human waste was beneath the dignity of an emperor, Vespasian famously held a gold coin under Titus's nose and asked, "Does this smell?" When Titus said no, Vespasian replied, "Pecunia non olet." Money does not smell. That phrase is the motto of your life right now. You watch the taxman count the amphory you hauled in from the street corner earlier. He is tallying up your harvest. The irony is staggering. The state provides nothing. The citizens provide the pee, the fuller provide the labor, and the sun provides the fermentation. Yet, the emperor demands a cut simply because the transaction happened. You reach into the lockbox under the counter and pull out a handful of silver denarii. You hand them over. The taxman drops them into his purse. Clink. He is right. The silver smells like metal and salt, not like the vat it is paying for. But the relationship between the fuller and the taxman goes deeper than just a simple sales tax. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of night: the latrine leases. The fullers didn't just scavenge for urine. They were often the official franchisees of the public toilet system. The large public latrines, ****, those famous rooms with the marble bench seats and the open holes, were often leased out to fullers. You paid the city a fee for the exclusive right to empty the cistern beneath the seats. You were essentially paying rent for sewage. This turned the fullers into the de facto sanitation department of Rome. If the fullers went on strike or couldn't pay the lease, the latrines would overflow and the city would drown in filth. You realize that your dirty job is actually the linchpin of Roman urban planning. The taxman makes a mark on his tablet, sealing the deal. He looks around the shop, wrinkling his nose slightly at the smell, but his eyes are respectful. He knows the truth that polite society ignores. Fullers are rich. The Follonica is an industrial gold mine. Because the toga is the mandatory uniform of citizenship, demand never drops. Every politician, every lawyer, every groom needs you. You are recession-proof. The Follonica of Stephanus in Pompeii, where we are metaphorically standing, was a mansion converted into a laundry. The owner had enough capital to renovate an entire palace. You might smell bad, but you eat off silver plates. You watch the taxman leave, disappearing into the crowd on the Via dell'Abbondanza. You look at the coins remaining in your box. They feature the profile of the emperor. The same emperor who taxes your pee also sponsors the games at the amphitheater where you spend your day off. It is a circular economy of fluids and violence. Now, as you close the lockbox, we reach a point of academic friction that keeps economic historians arguing in their lecture halls. The black market P debate. We know the tax existed, but did it work? Some historians argue that the Vectigal Urine was a masterstroke that regulated the industry and kept the streets clean by incentivizing collection. However, a significant group of scholars suggest it had the opposite effect. They argue that taxing urine created a black market for bladders. If the tax was too high, private citizens might have started hoarding their own family's waste in jars at home to sell directly to fullers off the books, bypassing the public pots and the tax collectors. Fullers might have engaged in midnight dumping or secret collections to avoid the public heinous. The debate is, did Vespasian's tax clean up Rome, or did it just turn every household into a smuggling operation for bodily fluids? As you look at the official stamped jars in your shop versus the unmarked ones in the back corner, you suspect the black market is alive and well. The psychological weight of this transaction is heavy. You are trapped in a system where your dignity is the cost of doing business. The senator looks down on you because you touch filth. The emperor taxes you because you touch filth. But both of them rely on you. You are the ultimate middleman. You transform the biological reality of a human body waste into the social ideal of the Roman state, the white toga. You are an alchemist who turns base matter into social status, and the tax you just paid is a license fee for that magic. You lean against the counter, feeling the cool stone against your back. The rush of the morning collection is over. The violence of the stomping and beating is over. The stress of the bleaching is over. And now, the pain of the payment is over. You have a few moments of quiet before the delivery boy comes to take the finished toga back to its owner. You look around the shop. It is a hive of activity, but it is also a community. The workers here live together, eat together, and stomp together. They are bound by the smell. You realize that while the outside world mocks you, singing songs about arms and the man while you sing of owls and cloth, inside these walls, there's a distinct culture, a culture of pride, a culture that knows that money is money, no matter where it comes from. You decide to take a short break. You walk over to a section of the wall near the back, away from the prying eyes of the taxman and the foreman. The plaster here is covered in scratches. It's not a ledger, it's a social network. The workers have been leaving messages here for years. You lean in to read them. The quiet struggle of business is over. The quiet struggle of expression is about to begin. You're going to read the ancient equivalent of a Twitter feed, scratched into the wall of the laundry room. You lean your back against the cool, painted plaster of the Philonica's rear wall. The frantic energy of the day has ebbed away. The sun is dipping lower, casting long, golden shadows through the open atrium roof, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the still air. Your legs ache from the stomping. Your arms ache from the beating. Your lungs ache from the sulfur. But for a few precious minutes, you are off the clock. You turn your head and look at the wall next to you. To a casual observer, it looks like a mess of random scratches. But to you, and to anyone who knows how to look, it is a library of whispers. You run your finger over the rough surface. The plaster is scarred with hundreds of lines, carved with the sharp points of styluses, nails, or perhaps the buckle of a sandal. This is the ancient Roman internet. This is the comment section of the 1st century AD. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that changes how we see the ancient working class, the ubiquity of graffiti. When we think of Roman writing, we think of majestic inscriptions chiseled into marble on the Pantheon, written in perfect, geometric capital letters. But the real voice of Rome is found here, in the graffito, Italian for little scratch. In Pompeii alone, archaeologists have cataloged over 11,000 pieces of graffiti. They are everywhere, on the walls of bars, basilicas, brothels, and yes, laundries. The Romans had no concept of blank space. If a wall was smooth, it was a canvas. And unlike modern graffiti, which is often just tagging, Roman graffiti was conversational. It was a dialogue frozen in plaster. You squint at a cluster of scratches near your shoulder. It takes a moment to decipher the cursive Latin, which is messy and colloquial. It reads, asterisk, successus textor Macaponi ancillum nomini iridem, quae cadem illum non curat, sed al rogat illa commissaritor. Asterisk, Successus the weaver loved the innkeeper's slave girl, Iris. She doesn't care for him, but he begs, and she feels sorry for him. You chuckle softly. You know Successus. He works in the weaving shop down the street. Apparently, his unrequited love for Iris is now public knowledge, immortalized right next to a tally of how many tunics were washed yesterday. Beneath that, in a different hand, perhaps a rival, someone has written asterisk scripsit invidiosus. Asterisk, an envious guy wrote this. And below that, a third person has simply drawn a crude caricature of a man with a gigantic nose, labeled Successus. You are looking at a flame war that has been going on for 2,000 years. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night. The Fullers' united political machine. You might think laundry workers were too low status to care about politics, but the walls tell a different story. The Fullers were a powerhouse. On the facade of this very shop, and many others in Pompeii, you can find painted election notices known as dipinti. They don't just say, vote for Halconius. They say, Full Ones Universi Rogan. All the Fullers ask you to elect Halconius Priscus as duumvir. The laundry workers were essentially a trade union. They voted as a bloc. If a politician wanted the clean toga vote, he had to come here, stand in the smell, and shake your hand. You realize that despite the pee and the labor, you possess a collective power that the elite cannot ignore. You scroll down the wall with your eyes. There are jokes. Asterisk, Samius to Cornelius. Go hang yourself. Asterisk simple, direct, effective. There are boastful claims about sexual prowess that we probably shouldn't translate on a family-friendly broadcast. There are shopping lists, asterisk, lard, garlic, cheese, oil, asterisk, and there are drawings. Boats, gladiators, phalluses. The Romans drew them everywhere as good luck charms, and intricate geometric patterns doodled by someone who was clearly bored out of his mind during a long shift. This brings us to a point of academic friction that keeps linguists and historians arguing in their seminars, the literacy debate. For centuries, the assumption was that the Roman working class, slaves, laborers, fullers, was largely illiterate. Reading and writing were seen as a preserve of the elite and their highly trained scribes. However, the sheer volume and variety of graffiti in places like this Thessalonica challenged that view. These scratches weren't made by professional scribes. They are too messy, too spontaneous, and often contain phonetic spelling errors, like writing K instead of C. A significant group of modern scholars, led by William Harris and others, argues that functional literacy was much higher in the Roman Empire than in medieval Europe. They suggest that even a laundry worker needed to read, to sort the clothes, read the tags, and understand the orders. The wall you are leaning against is evidence that the average Roman Joe could not only write, but could write poetry, puns, and insults. The debate is, was Rome a society of readers, or are we just looking at a few super slaves who showed off? As you read a complex pun about a gladiator spear, you side with a literate mob theory. The humanity of the wall is overwhelming. These people had the same problems you do. They fell in love with people who didn't love them back. They hated their bosses. They got bored at work. They worried about what to buy for dinner. The Thessalonica isn't just a chemical plant. It's a living, breathing community. You feel a strange kinship with Successus the Weaver. You hope he eventually got over Iris. You trace a particularly deep scratch near the floor. It looks like a date. Asterisk 6 Itis February. Asterisk February 8th. It marks the day a specific batch of wool arrived. It's a mundane detail, but it anchors you in time. You are standing in a specific moment, in a specific year, in a specific shop. Suddenly, the foreman's voice cuts through your reverie, breaks over. The senator's man is here. You push yourself off the wall. The spell is broken. The voices of Successus, Iris, and the envious rival fade back into the plaster. You smooth down your tunic. You have one last job to do. You have to take the finished product, the glowing, white, stiff, chemically purified toga, and hand it over to the customer. You walk back to the folding table. The toga sits there, looking alien in its perfection. It is a masterpiece of your trade. It is no longer a sheep's coat. It is a symbol of civilization. You pick it up. It feels light now, the heavy water and grease gone, replaced by the stiffness of the press. You carry it toward the front of the shop. Outside, the sun is beginning to set. The light is turning that syrupy, golden color that only exists in Italy. The street is bustling with the evening rush. People heading to dinner, to the baths, or home. Standing in the doorway is a slave wearing a livery that marks him as the property of a powerful family. He looks impatient. He looks clean. He doesn't smell like ammonia. You hand him the toga. He takes it without saying thank you. He checks the hem, inspecting the whiteness. He nods, satisfied. He tosses a few coins to the foreman, the tip, and turns to leave. You watch him go. You watch your hard work, your sweat, and your craft walk away down the street. You will never see that toga again. Tomorrow, the senator will wear it to the forum. He will stand on the rostra and give a speech about the glory of Rome. He will look dazzling. The sun will catch the night of the fabric, and the crowd will be awed by his purity. No one will think about the urine. No one will think about the sulfur. No one will think about the hedgehog skin. They will only see the white. And that is the point. Your job is to be invisible. Your job is to erase the stain of reality so that the illusion of the empire can continue. You wipe your hands on your rag one last time. The shop is quieting down. The vats are bubbling silently. The graffiti on the wall is waiting for a new entry. Maybe you'll write one yourself before you leave. Something simple. Asterisk, I washed the Senate's laundry and all I got was this lousy rash. Asterisk, the quiet struggle of the graffiti is over. The quiet struggle of the delivery is over. Now, there's only the quiet struggle of the night. The shop is closing. The city is darkening. And you are finally, mercifully done. The slave carrying the toga has turned the corner, vanishing into the gathering gloom of the Via dell'Abbondanza. You stand in the doorway of the Falonica for a moment longer, watching the spot where the white fabric disappeared. It is a strange feeling. For the last 10 hours, that piece of wool was your entire world. You fought with it, stomped on it, beat it, and choked on sulfur for it. Now, it is gone, returning to a world of marble floors, dinner parties, and political speeches, a world you are not invited to. But as you look out into the street, you realize the true absurdity of your craft. You have just sent a garment of pristine, blinding whiteness out into a city that is fundamentally dark and dirty. This brings us to a mainstream history fact that changes how you visualize the ancient world. The darkness of Rome. We are used to cities that glow at night, but ancient Rome had no streetlights. When the sun went down, the city didn't just get dim, it got pitch black. The only light came from the moon, the stars, and the flickering torches of the wealthy. The streets were dangerous, filled with robbers, stray dogs, and open sewers. To walk through Rome at night was to navigate a labyrinth of shadows. In this darkness, the toga candida serves a specific, practical purpose. It is a beacon. When a senator walks home at night, surrounded by his entourage carrying torches, his white toga reflects the firelight. He glows. He is visible from blocks away. It is a safety feature as much as a status symbol. It announces, I am important, I am wealthy, and I am not to be touched. You realize that you haven't just cleaned a shirt. You have recharged a human light bulb. You watch a service pre-loosens, a lantern-bearing slave, walk past, guiding his master through the muck. The master lifts the hem of his toga high, terrified of the street. This leads us to an obscure, slightly bizarre fact of the night: the mud walk. There was actually a specific way of walking that wealthy Romans had to learn to protect their clothes. You couldn't stride confidently. You had to pick your way carefully, almost on tiptoe, to avoid the splashes from the slop buckets that people emptied out of second-story windows. It was a dance of paranoia. One well-aimed chamber pot could ruin 1,000 denarii worth of your hard work in a second. You wince. Imagine the toga you just pressed getting splattered before it even reaches home. As the street empties, you turn back into the shop. The Falonica is quieting down. The other workers are extinguishing the lamps. The fires in the sulfur room have burned out. The vats of urine sit silent and still, bubbling gently in the dark. This brings us to a final point of academic friction that keeps art historians arguing their galleries: the chromophobia debate. For centuries, Western culture has been obsessed with the idea that ancient Rome was a world of pure white marble. We look at the statues in museums, white, pristine, austere, and assume the city looked like that. But modern archaeology has proven that Roman statues and temples were actually painted in garish, bright, psychedelic colors: blues, reds, golds, and pinks. They were gaudy. This means that the white Rome we imagine is a myth, except for the toga. In a city of painted statues and colorful frescoes, the toga candida was one of the few things that was actually deliberately white. Some scholars argue that this contrast was intentional, that the white toga stood out because the rest of the world was so colorful. The fuller didn't just make clothes clean. He created the only blank space in a chaotic, technicolor world. You helped the foreman close the heavy wooden shutters across the front of the shop. Boom! The sound echoes. The connection to the street is severed. The smell of the city is shut out, leaving you alone with a familiar, comforting stench of ammonia. You look at your hands. They are dry from the clay, raw from the water, and stained from the work, but they are strong hands. You think about the senator who will wear that toga tomorrow. He will stand in the forum, and he will talk about Roman virtue. He will talk about purity, but he doesn't know what purity is. Purity isn't a state of being. It's a process. Purity is made. It is made by stomping in pee, burning sulfur, and scrubbing with dirt. You realize that you are the secret keeper of the empire. You know that the senator is not a god. He is just a man who spills wine and sweats like everyone else. The whiteness of his clothes is a lie that you tell for him, and you are good at telling it. The shop is dark now. You find your sleeping mat in the corner of the atrium, near the owl shrine. You lie down. The stone floor is hard, but after a day of stomping, it feels like a cloud. You close your eyes. You can still hear the phantom rhythm of the beaters. Asterisk, thwack, 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 asterisk, fading into the silence. You take a deep breath. The air is still sharp, but you don't notice it anymore. It just smells like home. You have survived another day in the most disgusting, essential, and profitable trade in history. You have turned filth into glory. And tomorrow, when the sun rises over Vesuvius, you will wake up, walk to the street corner, pick up a bucket, and do it all again. Because Rome is dirty, and someone has to wash it. Now, let the heavy wooden shutters of the Phalanacus stay closed. The noise of the street, the stinging scent of the ammonia, and the heat of the sulfur room are all fading away, drifting into the cool, quiet past. You don't have to lift any more heavy wool tonight. You don't have to worry about wine stains or tax collectors or the price of hedgehog skins. That is all 2,000 years ago, locked away in the ash and the earth. You are no longer a fuller standing on a wet concrete floor. You are just you, safe in your own bed, supported by soft pillows that smell of nothing but fresh air and clean linen. Linen that, thankfully, was washed by a machine, not a person. Feel the weight of the day lifting from your shoulders, just as the heavy toga was lifted from the press. The quiet struggle is finished. The vats are still. The water in the aqueduct is slowed to a gentle trickle. Imagine the city of Pompeii turning off its lights, one by one. The torches in the villas flickering out. The fires in the bakeries banking down to glowing embers. The great mountain, Vesuvius, sleeping silently in the distance, guarding the bay. The only sound left is the wind blowing through the cypress trees and the slow, steady rhythm of your own breathing. You have walked through the chemicals and the steam tonight. You have seen the invisible labor that built the image of an empire. But now, the work is done. The river of time has carried you to a quiet shore. You are safe here. The world will keep turning, and the clothes will get dirty again. But that is a problem for tomorrow. Let your mind drift away from the stone and the wool. Let it float into the soft, velvet darkness. You have done enough. You have cleaned enough. Now it is time to rest. Sleep, traveler. The shop is closed, and the city is at peace.